ahead and start the session. So thanks so much for joining us. My name is Randy Liaz. I am a master's student at the Carter School, and I'm also the manager of the Pivot Peace Lab, and we'll be talking about what that lab is all about. But this session today is about the Peace Labs in general. So first of all, welcome to Peace Week, which is organized by the Jimmy and Rosalind Carter School for Peace and Conflict Resolution at George Mason University. And each semester, the Carter School Peace Week brings together faculty, students, and alumni, as well as friends and partners from across the peace and conflict resolution community for a week-long conversation around how to effectively address urgent issues of peace and justice. And our theme for the 2025 Spring Peace Week event is conflict resolution in a changing and uncertain world. And in this session, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about the Carter School Peace Labs. So let's talk about what those are. About 4 years ago, Dean Alp had the idea to set up a series of peace labs that would be a home for research devoted to designing and implementing innovative programs, models, and practices. So he wanted there to be three major aspects of this. First of all, innovation, which is really about unconventional methodologies, cutting edge knowledge to design solutions and processes for reducing violence and building sustainable peace, and also restoring relationships among social groups. So it's about evidence-based, measurable, and reproducible responses to the challenges posed by conflict. There's also the analysis portion, providing innovative tools for systemic analysis of conflict situations and dynamics, and helping institutions, organizations, and communities assess their conditions and the resources and programs that they need to assist with collaborative problem solving. And then the Peace Labs also focus on advancement, identifying, testing, and enhancing existing practices and tools and models of peace building and reconciliation, and assessing their potential and advancing their applications across different social contexts. And that really is about empowering community-based groups and supporting cross-fertilization between institutions at all levels of society. So there are currently 4 Peace Labs. First, we're going to hear from the Sustainable Peace Lab. That's directed by Professor Karina Korostelina. And here today we have the lab manager, Ksenia Bakhtiarova, who's going to be talking about the work of that lab. We also have the Narrative Transformation Lab. Here we go. So yes, that was Sustainable Peace Lab. And then we have TNT Lab, which is the Narrative Transformation Lab. And here today we have the director, Dr. Solon Simmons, and his lab manager is Audrey Williams, who is a PhD student. And then we're going to be hearing from us at the Pivot Peace Lab, and that consists of Dr. Daniel Rothbart, who's here. He's going to be talking about our lab, and I'm the manager of that lab. And then we have, last but not least, the Transitioning Justice Lab, and we have the director, Dr. Patricia Malden, here to talk about that lab. So with that, I wanted to just get to a quick icebreaker for the folks in the room. So we've got 17 people in this room, and I wanted to give us a chance to get to know each other real quick, and make this a space of a bit of community. So I wanted to ask the folks here, and you are able to turn on your cameras. So if you're able to do that, I would love to see the faces of the people who are joining us here in the session. So great to see you folks. And all right, yeah, we've got some others turning on their cameras. All right, awesome. And so this is called True of Me. This is a quick exercise where one person says something that they wonder if other people share that characteristic. And so if you do share that characteristic, I want you to leave your screen, your camera uncovered. If you don't share that characteristic, the way that we're gonna show that we don't is by covering up our camera like this. Just put your hand over your screen camera. All right. And so I'm gonna start us out with a quick fact about myself. All right, we got more folks on camera. Great. A quick fact about myself. I am a dog person, but right now I don't have a dog. And also if you are a cat person, but also right now don't have a cat or just a pet person in general, and but don't have a pet at the moment, leave your camera uncovered. If you do have a pet, or if you're just not a pet person, you can go ahead and cover your camera. Okay. All right. Well, so a fair number of us are pet people who don't have pets. So yeah, that's but of course, I take care of my brother's dog sometimes, and it's really nice to have access to pets, isn't it? So does anyone want to offer a fun fact about themselves that they are wondering if other people share? Can I get a couple other fun facts? Anybody want to say something about themselves? They wonder if anybody else shares. Yes, Raju. So I'm gonna go ahead and ask you to unmute.
Yes, my wife and I, we live in Boulder, Colorado, and we live across from a dog park, a huge dog park.
Okay.
And this is the most affluent area of the country where we live, and it's really nice, even though we don't have any pets. We
Hmm.
see so many dogs, and we get our fill of animals.
Mm.
So
Okay.
it's great to be a part. And just a little fun fact, I worked on Jimmy Carter's campaign in 1976 as a 15-year-old volunteer, really excited about public policy, still excited about public policy. And I was a Democrat for about 20 years, and then a Republican in Texas for a Democrat, Republican Democrat, uh, Reagan Republican, excuse me, for about
Mhm.
10 years. So that's my little fun fact, and thanks for letting me share.
All right, well, so maybe we'll turn that into a fun fact that we can see if other people share. So did anyone else get involved in political campaigns early in life, and consider themselves politically active early in life? I came to politics a little bit later in my life, so I'm going to cover my camera. But yeah, if anybody else got involved early on, all right, looks like a few of us in this room, a few folks did get involved early on. Very cool. All right. That's cool. So anybody else want to offer one last interesting fact about themselves to see? Yes, Solon, go ahead and
Um,
unmute.
so and this is I can almost tell the answer to this starting, but my name comes from foreign language. In particular, it's a Greek first name. So my first name is a Greek name.
Okay. Does anyone and is are you looking for other folks with
I
Greek?
am, yeah. I'm gonna say yes.
Okay. Does anyone else have a Greek first name? I'm going to cover up my camera because my name certainly isn't Greek. So does anybody else have a Patricia? Is Patricia actually rooted in Greek?
I get confused. No, it's not at all a Greek name,
Okay.
as far as I know.
All
But you
right.
did have another one though on there.
What's that?
You did have. I wasn't the only one though.
Oh, who else had a Greek first name?
My name is Greek, actually.
Oh, right on. Hey, okay. Very cool. Well, that's cool to find out. All right. Well, thanks for participating in this little icebreaker. It's clear that some of us share some things in common, so I like having that reinforced. So with that, I want to actually turn it over to the other person with a Greek first name, Ksenia Bakhtiarova, who is going to talk about the Sustainable Peace Lab. So Ksenia, please take it away.
Thank you. Nice transition. Yes, and thank you everyone for being here, and thank you, Randy, for organizing this. I feel like we don't have a lot of opportunities to talk about our labs and what we do. So I am Xenia. I am the manager of the Sustainable Peace Lab, and I work closely with Professor Karina Korostelina right here. We also have a research intern, Anhyun Bin, who is an undergraduate student, and also Zoe Smith, who is currently a master's student at the George Mason University Malta. We also have a lot of just lab members and affiliates who work with us on different projects and who help us in different ways. So what do we do exactly at the Sustainable Peace Lab? Our lab is largely formed by social psychological theories, like theories on intergroup and collective emotions, collective memory, social identity theory, identity-based conflict, you name it. I personally work on emotions mostly, and actually, I am working not only on social psychology, but I also borrow a lot from moral philosophy and network studies, etc., etc. Our lab is emphasizing evidence-based practice, which means that we take the theories that are usually empirically have empirical proof by experiments or by surveys, and then we try to implement them in real life, in real peace building interventions to see how they play out. And vice versa, the practice orients the theory. So Randy actually mentioned in the beginning how the labs were created to come up with innovative models and practices, and that's something that we do. And our lab is predominantly project oriented, which means that we have several projects going on usually, and different people sort of collaborate on those projects, on the papers that they are writing, and it's very flexible. So first, I would like to introduce the bridge model of reconciliation. That's something that we're working on continuously. And this model is actually based on the book. You can go ahead and try to scan the QR code. It will lead you to the book that it's originally stemming from. So what we're doing is we're actually building a website and a software that will allow people to deduce their own peace building strategies. So they will be asked questions from different areas such as bonding strategies or involving strategies or reassuring, and based on the responses that they're giving. For example, were there violent interest rate groups? Were the minorities included in the peace process, etc., etc.? And based on the responses, they will be given a certain recommendation on how to proceed with peace building. So this is something that we're really excited about, and it's kind of a big chunk of our work currently. Next is the integrated contact theory, which is based on the original contact theory, but it includes a little bit more of the practical components to it, such as programming and project management. So before certain events, actually we conducted a lot of projects, especially and workshops. Especially Karina was going around the world, and she would involve her students in those projects as well. And I had a chance to participate in one of the workshops that actually two that were conducted here in the US, and a lot of them are informed by the social psychological theories that I was talking about and by the models that we're developing. So something else very exciting that I would like to talk about, you can also scan the QR code here and see the latest publication of our lab on the dynamics of national identities in Ukraine. So this project was conducted in collaboration with the Ukrainian researchers who were gathering all the data and conducting all the interviews. And they were doing not only the interviews, but also social media posts analysis. So it was like a content analysis. And based on that, we derived three main national identity narratives in Ukraine amidst the war. Fight for Ukrainian culture, civic narrative, and multicultural narrative. Those three narratives were very predominant, and they involved a lot of different components that I can talk about hours and hours, but we do not have time for this. So I will just let you scan the QR code, read the article, and reach out to me or Karina if you have any questions. Also, another event I'm very excited to share is actually in September. So it's a long time from now, but I know everyone is very busy, so I encourage you to save the date. And it's a very hands-on event called Approaching Academic Conferences with Confidence. It's emerging from the need that we observed among the students who expressed the concern that they did not know how exactly to write the abstract, how to choose a conference, how to what does it involve? What are the logistics? And we decided that we would like to help the students with that, because academia is a lot about publishing and about presenting your work. And we would like to help students to build that confidence and build the skills to write and to present. So please stay tuned for that one. Also, I said before that we are predominantly a project-based lab, but also we're very open to organizing some new some new things, some events. And so we would like to hear from you. So please scan the QR code. It will lead you to a survey. And we would like to know what kind of events you would want. For example, weekly meetings where we would share some of the research and we would hear some research from you. Or, for example, book launches, workshops, you name it. So with that, I would like to conclude. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them.
Great, thanks, Ksenia. So we are gonna do a Q&A for each lab after their presentation. So we want to see if there are any questions specifically for the Sustainable Peace Lab now. We'll also have a bit of a Q&A at the end of the full session. So you can also ask questions then. But Raju, please go ahead and unmute, and what is your question?
Yes, thank you so much. Just quickly, my question is, I'm working with global social witnessing and dealing with the past in Kashmir in India. Is that something this lab would be interested in working with, since it has an emotional component?
Absolutely. Please reach out to us. I will actually post my email address in the chat room. So if you reach out to us, we can talk about it more, because we also do, especially Karina does a lot of work on the past and history textbook. So we will be excited to hear from you.
Okay, thank you so much. I've been working with Thomas Ubel in San Francisco on social global, so I'll reach out to you. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Raju. Any other questions for the Sustainable Peace Lab? Okay. All right, so now we're going to be moving on to our next Peace Lab, which is TNT Lab. So I wanted to introduce Professor Solon Simmons. Solon, please go ahead and
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Randy, and for organizing this and even providing some ambiance and making sure that we have a good experience together. So it's nice to see all of you. Those of you I don't know, nice to meet you. So I'm Solon Simmons, professor here at the Carter School. I've been here about 18 years as it happens, so I guess I've been here a while. All that time I've been studying narrative, and even prior to coming here, I've been studying narrative. What the narrative? So TNT Lab is meant to be a play on the explosive TNT, on the understanding that narrative is so powerful that it's both very useful and potentially dangerous. And frankly, my initial interest in narrative was more in its political uses. That is how you could use it if you like to win. But since I've come to this Carter School, which is quite some time now, I've been more focused on how you can use narrative to come together, much like what Xenia was saying just a minute ago. And frankly, narrative approaches are deeply complementary to identity-based approaches. The most obvious way this happens is that in a narrative, you need to have a protagonist and an antagonist. You don't have a narrative without conflict, which is one of the reasons why narrative is such a powerful way to approach conflict resolution, because we study conflict, and narrative is inherently about conflict. And so you have a protagonist and an antagonist, and usually in a narrative story, a conflict story, the protagonist is your group, and it's usually formed in a particular way that is flattering toward the group and critical of the other group. And so, if you want to transform those identities in some systematic way, the argument that we make is that you're going to have to do some kind of narrative work. And so, in that way, it's important for you to understand that none of these labs are in some sense mutually exclusive to one another. And I think that'll be true of all the labs presented today. What I would say is distinctive. So, where does the lab happen? This might be the first question you'd ask. How can you get involved? We have a website, and in fact, let me see if I can share this thing. Yes, we have. Let me share this website. So this is one which is open to our basic plot types. This is a recent book that I published. But we try to take all the material that we have and we put it on the web in a more user-friendly way, so that anybody could get access to it right away. So you don't have to go buy the book to see the basic ideas there. Um, um, let's see, how does this work? One, two. Sorry. You're still seeing the website, is that right? So yeah, I'm going to go over here. So let's go to TNT. So you can find it at TNT Lab, Carter School. This is our basic landing page. Our tagline is "Tell Your Story, Change the World." And what you have here is you've got quite a bit in terms of resources, and I don't think that people have fully utilized this maybe in the way that they could. You've got we have our mission, we have their mission and values. We've got our team. Audrey Williams is the lab manager, much like, so you'll see some other lab managers here today. She's the good news is Audrey's at a job talk to become a professor potentially, so that's an exciting reason for her not to be here, which also means that we will have an opening potentially in the lab manager role at TNT Lab. But what we've got here, so we've got a number of guides and resources here. I wrote a book called Root Narrative Theory, which is a way of measuring ideology, and you can find that materials on how to deal with what root narrative theory is there. We've also got some other interesting resources. We've got these things we call rabbit holes, which are specific narrative projects that are a kind of a curation of what I call paracurricular activities and so on. So anyway, this lab site is a place where you can, I mean, this website is a place where you can find a lot of what we do, and we're trying to build this out over time. But the other place that the Narrative Transformation Lab happens is on Thursdays at 2 p.m. So every Thursday at 2 p.m., you're all invited. Anybody's invited. You just have to write to Audrey to get invited, to come and share out what's going on, anything that's related to conflict resolution work you're doing on narrative. And many people on this call have been there, have come to the lab, and we invite more. The most typical thing that people do there is present work that they are going to go present somewhere else. So in preparation for this event, you might have decided to say, hey, could we use the lab space to to prepare for this Peace Week event, or for a conference, or for a job talk, or any number of other things that are relevant for student life. But the idea is to have a community of practice who come together around issues of narrative, and share out stories. Sometimes we have famous people come. Sometimes, we have a variety of things. And the other thing I want to say about that is that space exists for you to use as you like. So if you want to do something that's related to narrative and conflict resolution, then I would encourage you to write to us and think about presenting. One final thing I'll say about where the lab happens. The lab happens on the web. It happens on a Zoom call, so you don't have to come in person. And then it happens in the classroom. And this is maybe unique to the Narrative Transformation Lab in the sense that TNT Lab is the lab version of an older center that existed for more than a decade at the Carter School, called Narrative Conflict Resolution, Narrative and Conflict Resolution, the Center for Narrative and Conflict Resolution, I believe it's called, that Sarah Cobb ran. What we have, therefore, two classes that directly support the work that we do in the TNT Lab. One is Conflict 704, which is more or less a narrative theory class where you get the broad view on how what narrative is, what a narrative perspective is, and how you would do a narrative approach. And in that way, perhaps the only other lab that is, I mean, I don't know if this is right, but certainly there's some that the identity-based classes would supplement Karina's lab. But we have that 704 and we have a 705, which is a methodology course. So if you wanted to do narrative methodology, whatever that can mean, we would have an approach to doing narrative methodology in 705. So there's two courses. There's a Thursday at 2 p.m. section, and there's the website. And then, of course, there's books and everything that all the people who are associated with the lab do. Oh, and final thing is this. If you're an undergrad, we have a very aggressive, I would call it, internship program where we try to pair. Oh, yeah, this is interesting. So what we're trying to do now is if you're a PhD student want to do narrative work, you could come to us and we'll try to match you with an undergrad and oversee that. I will oversee that relationship and make it so that that undergrad could support you in your work. But it would have to be narrative-based work. But that is so to leverage the PhD undergraduate relationship and function more like a we might call it a hard science lab might do. So those are the broad overviews of what we do at TNT Lab.
All right, thanks so much, Solon. So I wanted to give the audience a chance to ask questions of Solon about the TNT Lab. So if you do have a question, please go ahead and raise your hand. I just wanted to mention that personally, I'm right now in Solon's 704 class, the narrative theory class, and it's really fascinating. And getting to read some of Sarah Cobb's work for last week class or the class before last week about how one pivots a story into one that is more conducive to connection between two groups. That was really fascinating. And so, Solon, if others don't have questions yet, I actually wanted to pose my own question, which it's really, the work we've been doing is so fascinating that I would love to hear a little bit more about what that looks like, what that pivot looks like in practice, in an actual conflict that maybe you've experienced or know about that where a successful pivot towards a more productive narrative
Yeah.
has actually helped the situation.
Sure, let's go macro. So one of the biggest challenges of the narrative work is that the narrative work began in the interpersonal processes, primarily in relationships and families and small group interpersonal processes. And the challenge has always been to try to take that narrative transformation approach and do it writ large in mega politics or in large scale. So let me use an example that we're familiar with. And that is so if you take so the critical idea that comes out of this narrative transformation approach is that if you want to change if you want to change a relationship, get people to tell a tragic story about themselves. This is the basic idea. And I have a whole theory about what a tragic story is and how you do that and what ways that you can intervene to make it tragic. But the long story short, make your story tragic, your own story, not theirs, yours. And then out of that, refashion identities. So this is why the identity work is central to what we do. And then tell a news story and elaborate a news story around those new identities. So the most famous example of this is probably the invention of a new identity called Judeo-Christian civilization, which is a product of World War II. That did not exist in the current form that we use it prior to that. That people didn't speak in that way, but coming out of the tragedy, again, a tragic story of the West, having recently gone through the Holocaust, imposed by its own Christian marginalization of Jewish people, produced an introspective moment in which people decided that framing civilization in terms of Christendom, that is the domain or what have you of Christianity, was a pernicious and dangerous thing. And so that reformulation by various scholars and people and activists and what have you of this this newish concept of Judeo-Christian civilization is a very clear, I think, an obvious example of the kind of uses of a tragic pivot to a new identity that is a more inclusive and peaceful one.
Wow, that's a really fascinating example. I definitely not heard of that before. So, and I think that, many people are familiar with the framing of Judeo-Christian uh, kind of religions, and also, it's interesting how the Abraham Accords were,
Another example.
yeah, were framed that way too, because the three religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are known as the Abrahamic religion. So a way to frame that as unity in what they were trying to achieve there. So yeah, thanks very much. There's also a question from Emily Williams in the chat about how some present graduate coursework relates to the lab's work, and she mentions that she's planning to take discourse analysis in the
Yeah.
fall.
Yeah, yeah. So that's Conflict 705, and that's the methodology class. So we will work with narrative theories in there, specifically TNT related theories, but we'll actually learn how to do research using a narrative point of view in that class, and potentially and preferably research on conflict resolution interventions. That's the best way to think about it.
All right, very cool. Well, thanks very much, Solon. Any last questions before we move on to the next lab? Okay, so I'm very excited to introduce the director of my lab, Professor Daniel Rothbart, who's going to be talking about the Pivot Peace Lab. And so, Dan, welcome. I'm gonna go ahead and
Okay,
share some
thank,
slides on that.
thank you very much. And it's always a pleasure hearing about the other labs. And every time I hear about the labs that Xenia was talking about and Solon, I think so many points of intersection and collaboration. And one theme that we just talked about is transformation. As you see, our lab is called Polarization Violence Transformed. And the transformation, we just heard examples of it that Solon was just talking about and Xenia, and just kind of the centrality of that process cannot be overstated. I believe that conflict resolution is all about transformation. And that is kind of our mission of the whole field. And I think each of these labs basically enlivens that theme with respect to the kind of the combination of delving deeply into the underpinnings of conflict, and then, of course, providing innovative and evidence-based practices towards transformation. So, okay, Randy has some nice slides, and so Randy is the manager and basically the guiding light for everything that we do pretty much. And we are so fortunate to have Grace McIntyre and Madison Vrong as interns who are doing great work already. And we look forward also to other interns. So Randy has some slides. So you've got the power there. So let's see, what's this slide? Oh, our mission. Okay. So I started with the word transformed. Let me go back to the word polarization. So you know that the polarization, of course, is a very central term within the context of the political crisis in the United States. Polarization tends to focus on social, psychological processes of, as it were, fixed categories of division, fixed practices of acrimony, and so on, some of which foster violence. Not always foster violence, but under many conditions that they do. So our mission, as you see here, is to understand these processes of polarization, like where are they located? Obviously social media, various media, could be family dynamic, could be political leaders, and so on. And the point of delving deeply into those causes and characters and consequences of polarization is to come up with measures, of course, for mitigation, for reduction, or ideally elimination. So it's, all of those eliminating the negative effects of polarization. It's kind of hard to imagine just completely kind of eliminating all polarization, but the negative effects through various forms of practices. This is a challenge. Obviously, we just had a session this morning on the extremist violence in the United States. And let me underscore that our lab is focused on conflicts in the United States as well as international conflicts in other countries. So we are recognizing and encourage, obviously, positive change from in which the groups basically transform from conflict agitators to possibly to peacemakers. Obviously, that's an idealistic goal, but this should be understood incrementally. It's clearly not an all or nothing process, and it's not utopian because there are very clear examples. Actually, in every protracted violent conflict, there are some people who transform their lives from being agitators of conflict to peacemakers. And this obviously is an important theme for many conflicts. So what do we do? Okay, so we investigate. So um, the labs are basically mostly student led. We have right now 18 students that have committed to participate in some way or other in the lab work, and they can participate in different ways. They can, the lab, the student researchers, in addition to attending the events that we had, such as today's event, there's another event that's happening on April 25th that Randy's going to mention in a few minutes. But in addition to doing that, we are focused on basically coming up with innovative practices, and we strongly encourage lab researchers to participate in lab projects, which I'm going to mention what those projects are in a minute. So the research is directly lead to projects, and critical to that, as you see on the slide, is collaboration. So we collaborate with students and in some cases professors from other departments. We collaborate with the other labs. It's such a natural. In fact, I have some ideas right now from just listening to this event of possible collaboration. Obviously, collaboration with so much of our work is narrative analysis. So much of our work is the work of the lab that Karina Korstalina directs and Xenia is the managers. So collaboration is critical both within academia and of course with practitioners. We meet with practitioners. We just met with a NGO yesterday for possible collaboration. What else do we have? Okay, so you see here, Randy has these neat slides of the 4 labs, and under our pivot lab, we have these projects. Okay, so there is violence in Sudan. So Sudan is one of my specializations, peacemaking in Sudan. I've been working on for a very long time. There are, by the way, striking similarities between the acrimony and hostility in Sudan, connections with the current political crisis in the United States. But regarding Sudan, we're working on 2 projects. So one is investigating human rights violations associated or committed by the combatants in the current civil war in Sudan. So you may know that Sudan for the past 2 years has been ravaged by a civil war, which has created the greatest humanitarian crisis in the world. That was just um, uh, identified as such by the United Nations and other organizations. So we basically had a project of reporting on human rights violations. We have 9 reports that are available for public access. Actually, now they're at the George Mason Archives. A second project on Sudan is a project to understand and studies social cohesion. So social cohesion is one important topic. Obviously, it applied to many protracted violent conflicts. Social cohesion is in great need, but there's great potential for positive change in Sudan to break the pattern of many, many wars. I'm going to skip Delta because Randy's going to mention that in a minute, but our other project is extremist groups in the United States, and we are currently working on a theory of extremist violence, which I talked about briefly this morning at a Peace Lab event, a Peace Week event, and we have a number of case studies that are currently underway that we're doing research for that, and we're exploring the practice basically of showcasing the wisdom and insight of former extremists to serve basically as kind of like key figures in de-radicalization in the United States. And the one on the right, Polarization, Transformation, and Compassion, is a project that I've been working on for a couple years on and off. That's kind of fledgling project right now, but we are very open to the integration, sorry, to the inseparability of positive change with systemic compassion. That is norms of practice of compassion, which basically we can find in the history and value systems of many conflict groups. So that project is kind of worth. We need more direction and clarity on that, but we're very open to having researchers explore that. And Randy, tell us about the Delta project.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So the Delta project started last year with an event in October where we had a bunch of academics from around the DMV area gather together for panel discussions that were moderated by Isaac Saul, who's a journalist, an independent journalist who leads the outlet Tangle that presents both sides, the liberal side and the conservative side of an issue every day of the week. And then Isaac gives his balanced take on that issue in a newsletter. And it's a fantastic media product, and I really recommend that people check that out. And the idea for the network started with an event that began with Isaac wanting to come to college campuses. And because I had a lot of contacts with campuses and labs around the DC area that were focused specifically on polarization, I decided to pull together this conference. And Dan, Solon, and Karina were there. And we also had Jeff Helsing, who was he was actually in Malta at the time and remotely attended. And it was just an incredible series of conversations. It was about violence. It was also about narratives and about the future of the study of polarization in academia. And from that came the idea of the Delta Network, Depolarization Labs and Trainers Alliance. And so it started last October, and now the alliance is focused on building bridges across the partisan divide and academics who work specifically on those challenges. And we've got a couple of main goals for the Delta Network. First of all, we want to build awareness. Right now, the field of study is pretty nascent, and many students don't know about chances to study polarization, as well as the plummeting levels of interpersonal and institutional trust in the United States, and the chance to build a career around helping to strengthen our democracy by addressing those challenges. The other major pillar is building community. Many of the leaders of the labs that exist around the DC area, as well as around the country and even around the world, don't know what the others are doing, or sometimes that they even exist. And so we are trying to bring them together to share insights on various aspects of polarization and create collaborations, as Dan emphasized. Collaboration is such a central feature of the Peace Labs, And it's definitely a main goal of the Delta Network. So I wanted to talk about the next event for the Delta Network, which is going to be next week. It's actually going to be on Friday, and it'll be at the Point of View Retreat Center, which is an amazing facility that was built literally for peace talks, to be able to gather leaders to work through intractable conflicts. And we are so grateful that we are able to use this amazing facility for our Delta Summit. It's a political bridging summit, and it's got three different aspects of it. So first is going to be a student research expo, and we have 5 students, I believe, so far signed up to present their research or research ideas, research directions to the faculty who are going to be in attendance. And they'll be able to get feedback from the faculty, guidance about areas to explore and contacts to create to forward their research. So that'll be really exciting. And then we're going to have a session that's focused on the faculty themselves. They'll get to share the research they've been doing. They will also get to talk about what they think are the frontiers of their research and research in general about polarization. And hopefully from this, it will seed more collaboration. And we've got folks from a few different schools. So at the event in October, we had 5 different schools represented. We had 4 different professors from Mason, 4 different professors from Georgetown, and we also had professors from American, Johns Hopkins, and GW. And so we're actually going to have at least 3 schools represented at the summit so far: GW, Mason, and Georgetown. And we may get 1 or 2 more. So gathering together these professors and other academics to be able to focus on what their research is and how it overlaps and how it can how these folks can make one another's research and work practice as well more powerful is really the focus of that summit. So you can see the QR code for the summit if you'd like to register for that. Please go ahead and do that. You're also welcome to submit a project to present to the faculty panel. And we are accepting those submissions until this Friday. So please get them in, and then we'll make the final decision about all the projects that are included. And then the last part of this event is a screening of a stand-up comedy routine, which is it's called Just for Us. It's currently featured on HBO, and this is a fascinating story because it is a Jewish comedian who surreptitiously sat through a meeting of white supremacists in Queens, New York, and he tells this story in utterly hilarious fashion. But it also really digs into issues of identity and the limits of empathy. So we're going to watch this movie and then we're going to talk about it afterwards. We're going to have a great discussion, and I'm really, really excited about this. So yeah, please sign up to attend this event, and we would love to see you there. We're going to drop into the chat some information about our lab. So I'm going to do that now. Um, let me just.
And let me add the participation, we prefer in person, but it can be virtual.
Yes. So here we go. All right, putting our lab information in the chat. So it is there. And as Dan mentioned, we are also looking for future interns. So yeah, as you can see from the other labs, labs in general, we have great internship programs, right? And right now, our lab is particularly looking for interns focused on grant research and grant writing, as well as communications. So if you're interested in an internship with a lab, then please reach out to us. Our email addresses are in the chat, and we would love to hear from you. And so I want to open it up to questions for us in the Pivot Peace Lab. So I'm gonna stop my screen share for now and see, does anyone have any questions for us about the work of Pivot Peace Lab, Polarization and Violence Transformed? Any further questions?
Okay, I guess we answered everything.
Yeah, and I also wanted to recognize our two interns, Grace and Madison, are here in the room with us. So great to have you joining us, and they've been doing some really great work supporting the lab. So we really appreciate that. So with that, I want to transition to Patricia Malden, who's going to be talking about the Transitioning Justice Lab. And Patricia, are you going to be sharing your slides, or would you like me to share those?
I would like you to share because it would be a debacle if it was in my hands.
Okay, well, I will do that now.
Okay. I'm representing the Transitioning Justice Peace Lab that we have had for a couple of years. We've been on hiatus, and now in the spring or whatever the next in the fall, I'll be putting in a plea for interns and students that are interested in thinking through restorative justice and its effects, and I'm going to talk about that through the slides. Okay, can you put it down one? Thank you. So what does justice look like through a restorative lens? Restorative justice includes incarcerated individuals and recently freed individuals. It's thinking about justice, we think often that, the judge and the gavel and they've deserved it and this and that. But what might it look like if it was, yes, they'll, given everything that happens to them and happened to them in their youth and all that sort of thing? What does restorative have to do with that? And so theoretically, this is, it's pretty simple. For me, every person counts. Every person, no matter who. Everyone needs to be respected, heard, and understood. Everybody. Not that we get these things, but it's essential for a community or a society that wants to move towards real justice. Everyone deserves to be treated justly. Everyone is capable of change and healing if their needs are met. Justice requires accountability that changes and heals people and relationships. People create justice together. Can you go to the next slide, please? So what are some of the core elements of that? So there's the encounter. I don't know if you've ever sat with or worked with or had family folks, what it's like for somebody to come out of prison, what it's like for somebody to go into prison. The damage that is inevitable for those reasons can lead to, depending on whose ideas are what, it can transform or it can damn at any range in between. I've seen all of that. So how does it create the path towards well-being and wholeness? We talk about well-being, but often that doesn't get through the prison doors. Well-being has very little to do with it. What about victims? Yes. What about offenders? What are community members that can experience those core elements? What happens to them? How might they be able to find some peace through different kinds of experiences with staring at their other, whoever did what and whoever did the harm? And what does encounter lead to? To repair, and repair leads to transformation. And then the last in this cycle is, how do we build hope in the middle of a violent onslaught? I have been in prisons. I wasn't sent to prison. I went there on purpose. And so hope in the middle of a violent onslaught is really hard to do. How do we even consider the fact that given my life, let's say, and I've done this, this, and this, or I haven't done this, this, and this, and I've still been incarcerated? Where is the hope in that? Could you switch? So what is the theory of change? We've, as scholars, what is the theory of change in the context of prisons and criminal justice? And how does that refer to a roadmap that outlines how programs, interventions, and so on can lead to desired outcomes, such as the desistance from crime or improved reintegration into society? How does that happen? It helps to understand how programs work, how to measure their effectiveness, and how to improve them. So there's a lot of prison fellowships. I don't know if you've ever worked with anybody or talked with anybody about those. They can be very effective depending on how they're organized and how they're presented and assorted other dynamics. So if you have somebody, I've had multiple family members imprisoned for various things over the years. So first, the prisoners form a new, how do you be positive inside a massive security prison? How does that happen? It happens, but how does that happen? So how do, as an incarcerated woman, how would I get back how would I shift my identity to whom I really was and not the label of she's a whatever? How does that work? And is it our responsibility to think about that? I think it is. But again, I've had family members and et cetera, who have done terrible things. So how did social relationships support when they get home? What is reentry like? It's hell, I can tell you, because nothing is easy for anyone that comes out and goes into reentry. And how do we self-identify? How do we transform how we see ourselves and how we value ourselves? Can you please switch? Okay, so I went to a restorative justice training in a prison in Pennsylvania. And the Lifers Association were the ones who were training us. These men had been in there, it was maximum security folk. And those men had been in there, some of them 30 years. And there was no way this particular gentleman was getting out. And they had gone through this training themselves years ago and had worked through the hell that they had to work through. And they were willing to share that with us. It was part of a program that brings people together inside and outside. So I'm going to, can you put it down again? Do I have another link? Is there another shift or no?
Yeah.
Okay, so go back to that. Then I'll just talk it through. So the Lifers Association taught us how to be with them. They were kind. They talked about what they did and how long they'd been there and what they'd learned, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they didn't mince words. We had dinners, we had lunch together. We had snacks together. We were together for a week. And that week changed my life. It showed me it showed me parts of myself that I didn't even think about and am very ashamed of. So they taught me, and we hopefully taught them. And I have a photograph of all of us. There's probably 25 of us on rafters and stuff at the final, but I'm not going to show that because it shows them. One of the gentlemen that was in a lunch meeting was we were walking around waiting for the rest of the data to finish, we discovered that we were both born in Compton, California. So we talked about Compton, California. We talked about the freeway that went through there. And we talked about stuff that we had in common, which was little, but there was that. We were born in that same area and had different experiences, certainly, but there were moments of connection within that. And the moments of connection were wonderful. And the kindness that they showed, and the, bunch of mostly white folk coming in, and they, kind of go, oh no, here they are again. But they worked, we had different groups, and it was wonderful. So the idea of restorative justice is about shifting from you're a criminal, which, we could say they are, to I am a human of that deserves respect for what I have accomplished in this space and the price that I've paid, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I get very emotional about this. I still do. So that's my gig. And how do we learn to love? And also the students get queasy when I talk about love. But how do we learn to love our brothers and sisters who have erred, our brothers and sisters who need our help, et cetera, et cetera? So comments, questions, if you like.
Great, thanks, Patricia. So I'm going to stop the share here so we can see if there are folks who would like to ask questions. Okay. Oh, yes, we've got a question from Raju. Raju, go ahead and unmute yourself, and if you want to start your camera, you're welcome to do that as well.
Sure. Thank you so much, Patricia, for this very difficult subject. I'm wondering, it seemed like at one time restorative justice was experimented in South Africa.
Oh yeah, it's ancient. It's
and
ancient.
And I've discussed this with people in Kashmir, because there's a lot of men who are missing on both sides, Hindus and Muslim.
Yeah.
And so I've talked about this, but the only people that want to speak up are the brave women who have
Yes.
lost their husbands. But nobody else wants to talk about restorative justice.
Yeah.
They don't. They say bury the past, bury the past.
Yeah,
Don't bring it back up.
Yeah, but in different places outside of the US, the women are the ones that are doing the peace building. The women are the ones that are, talking about where's my husband, because they've been disappeared and all that sort of thing. So yeah, so the women hold up the sky, basically, in my view. They can hold up the sky. Yeah.
So I'm wondering, individually it's hard. There's a lot of people don't want to speak up. But I'm wondering, does restorative justice work if one person speaks up and there's like 500 people witnessing or watching and listening to that story, and then other people can go, oh, that happened to me too. And then they connect to the story, but they're not actually able to come out and speak themselves.
Yeah, but that's, there's a lot of fear in many places around this, like saying anything negative about whatever. And yeah, so it sometimes they have to like tread carefully. And but people are very brave in many places. They're very brave. And the women just go, get out of here,
And the other thing about restorative justice, just to ask you a quick question, have you noticed that there's more actors involved, bad actors? So it's like hard to figure out, if a bad actor comes over across the border and does something and then goes back, it's
Yeah.
hard to turn them down.
Yes, it is. And often it's not about the bad actors necessarily, because, well, it is about the bad actors if somebody's been harmed. But to do it without the bad actors and do it with themselves, to do the healing for themselves, even though the bad actor's already gone and he might come back or they might come back. But for this point in time, let's do as much healing as possible. Let's raise up our children to know, etc., and that sort of thing. So that's been what I've seen and engaged with.
Thank you. I've been a part of the GMU with Professor Al, where
Mhm.
we're looking at healing
Yeah.
and forgiveness over the last few years. Actually, I've been participating for like 2, 3 years now, and it's such a tough subject. But I think it's there's a lot of science, neuroscience, a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So thanks. I appreciate your work.
You're welcome.
And thank you for those great questions, Raju. I really appreciate it. Ksenia, I see that you have a question.
Uh, yes, a comment and a question. So, what you were saying, and what Roger was saying actually reminded me of military forces in Russia, of soldiers who were drafted into the war in Ukraine,
Mhm.
and how the wives of those soldiers are trying to protest. They're very fearless, in my opinion. I have a lot of respect for them. They're the ones who go outside and say, "Where are our husbands? Stop the war." They
Mhm.
are the biggest oppositioners of the war. They want their husbands to be back home. So, and I imagine that it will be very difficult because right now I noticed that's actually something I'm working on. I'm noticing polarization in the Russian society, a lot of distrust and a lot of polarization along the lines on where do you stand on the subject
Right.
of war? Are you against or are you pro?
Mhm.
So I imagine that reintegration would be very difficult because the government rejects the notion that there is war at all.
Yeah.
A lot of people
Yes.
say that this war was unnecessary and condemn the war, of course. So I was wondering if there were some similar processes and some restorative justice processes in the US in relation to the Vietnam War and the war in Iraq for the
Mhm.
soldiers who came back and who did not have a very good
They had
reception.
a hard time.
Yeah.
They had a hard time. So partly from, I'm just going to ramble here. For the men who come back, it's it's harder. It's hard in a way that is very masculine. Um, and then the women will come in. Yeah, so that's a really good question. I can't answer it necessarily, but I can say that if the women are serious, they'll do it. They will. I'm not sure how much, if they've, what the Russian understanding of restorative justice is, if it has any at all. But the idea of just somebody coming in and saying, maybe we all talk together. Even the women will get together and talk about their husbands and their concerns, right? And so that's helpful. But it's so deep, yeah. I'm not being much help to you, but the women are strong.
Yeah, I wanted to add a little something to that because Ksenia, I definitely had heard the same thing about both wives and mothers being, the really vocal, being
Yep,
strong,
yep.
stand up for their children and their husbands, and it's incredibly powerful. And also, even before you had mentioned the uh, the aspect of soldiers returning, that's exactly what I was thinking about because a few years ago I read a book by Sebastian Junger, who has been a war journalist for many years, and he talks about the process of soldiers returning and trying to reintegrate into
Mm.
society. And Patricia, the challenges that you mentioned that former inmates have in reintegration are similar to
Yeah.
some challenges that folks have coming back from war. And I think that one of the common threads is that the folks who are best integrated back into society are the ones who actually have a platform to speak, who can actually share their burden with
Yeah.
others in society. And so in his book, Sebastian talks about having veterans town halls where veterans can talk about their experiences at war, and he emphasizes that issues like PTSD stem from not necessarily the incident itself, but the lack of support around them to share their experience with those incidents. So yeah, I wanted to give you a chance to talk about those challenges.
Yeah, those, oh gosh. War is, it doesn't end. It's held into the people's hearts and souls that have either been on the lines, or have had brothers, sisters, mothers killed, or struggling by harm, or just lack of food, or whatever it is. So the idea is, how does, what part of restorative would be, what aspects of restorative would we start with? Like, okay, so, and that probably doesn't make much sense to you, but the idea of the closeness and the closeness of violence, and when violence moves back, it still leaves its residue in our bodies, in our hearts, and in our minds. And how does that get worked away if it does? I've had lots of different family members, and there's been some suicides because they just couldn't. So yeah, I appreciate that question. Well, all your questions.
And I have a few more questions myself, but I wanted to emphasize that we want to give other folks a chance to jump in. We're supposed to end by 3:50, so we have 5 minutes more or so. If anybody else would like to ask questions. But I wanted to mention that in one of my classes, I have an incarcerated classmate, and I think that there might be a few incarcerated students at the Carter School, or
Yeah,
have been,
there
and I was
are.
yeah, and he talks about the work that he's doing with his fellow inmates and the
Mhm.
leadership that he's trying to to serve.
Yeah,
Um,
I know who you're talking about.
Okay, great. And so, yeah, I was wondering if you could talk about what that work looks like, when folks are in the carceral system, and the tools that we kind of give them to make that sort of change.
Okay. Well, I'm very glad that we started the bringing somebody in when, okay, now I'm going to space on him. Anyway, another former dean. And we had to go through the channels here in terms of school and this and that. But yeah, it can mean everything. It's, for one thing, it's an acknowledgement that they exist. It's an acknowledgement that they have earned their way to that point by whatever they've done, or whatever, you know, um, in terms of the carceral system. It is something that, I mean, I can be proud of my kids, but my kids, well, actually, two of my boys, I have two boys and two girls. Both of the boys have been in prison, which is really not a really cool thing to say, but they were. And so when they came out, one of them went okay, the other didn't. But they got out. This one, I don't think, is coming out anytime soon. So the idea of, how do we support that? How do we support brilliant scholarship? But it's behind a wall that we can't get to very easily. But there is Zoom, and there are all those things. But even so, I'm not sure. And they're remarkably brave, because it's not easy. And I spent it, as I probably said, that time inside the maximum security prison with in Pennsylvania. And I'm wondering, why has that man been in here for 35 years? He's a grandfather now. So what was it? Is it, just trying to be tough on crime? Is it, who knows? But the idea of we're all humans, we screw up, some more than others. And we all have a heart and a soul that is worth everything. So yeah, it's so problematic, Randy. So problematic. But
Well,
this brother that you're talking about is, yeah.
yeah. Well, thanks so much, Patricia. I don't see any further questions, so we're going to draw the event to a close. And I want to thank all of the folks who have presented here, Patricia, Xenia, Solon, Dan. Thank you so much for joining us, and for the folks who asked questions. Really appreciate that. Great engagement. So we've really enjoyed presenting to you. And
Here, I just want to thank Randy for bringing us all
Yes.
together. And this is just a model of how we can and should work together, establish cross-lab fertilization and projects and so on, and basically showcase the projects of each of the labs together. So thank you, Randy, for moving that forward.
absolutely. Yeah, my pleasure. And the link for TNT Lab as well is in the chat now. So yeah, thanks so much for joining us, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you at future Peace Week events.